Brought to you by Penguin. A Small Town in Ukraine by Bernard Wasserstein. Read by Steve John Shepherd. Preface. Krakowiec. The place we came from. The place we went back to. I first heard of it from my mother in the mid-1950s when I was about 9 years old. She told me Krakowiec was the town in Poland from which my father's family hailed. Actually, the name rang a curious bell in my childhood memory. 2 or 3 years earlier, a visitor from the past had come to our home. His name was Myus. No doubt he had a forename, but my father, if he mentioned him at all, always referred to him tout court by his surname, without Mr. or any other handle. I had the impression he did not welcome his arrival. Myus, his forename I later learned was Pinkas, or more familiarly, Pincher, was one of the few Jews from Krakowiec who had survived the Second World War. He talked with my father about his experiences. Then and later, I asked what he'd said, but for a long time my father would not reply. Perhaps he wanted to shield a child from dark shadows. Or maybe the reason was that he didn't altogether approve of Myus, who was later found guilty of operating an illegal still for the production of moonshine in the basement of his house in London. At any event, I discovered nothing of what our visitor related. I had to make do with the puppet-glove monkey that he gave me, a creature whose inside felt warm and soft, but whose exterior glared at me with a menacing grimace. My mother had never been to Krakowiec, and knew very little of the place. What with her relative ignorance and my father's stern reticence, I grew up knowing almost nothing about it. Yet throughout my youth I dreamt of this almost unmentionable and therefore all the more mysterious, almost mythic, ancestral hearth. Where exactly was Krakowiec? It was so small that it did not rate an appearance in our home atlas. Even when years later I consulted the largest scale maps available, the answer was unclear, since it appeared to be smack on the border between Poland and the Soviet Union. Suddenly, in 1989, the Iron Curtain was raised. With the disintegration of the Soviet Union 2 years later, Krakowiec emerged, as from a cloud, just inside the newly independent Republic of Ukraine. Not long afterwards, in the company of my brother, I visited the town for the first time. It was an eerie, eye-opening experience, described later in this book, that insinuated into my mind a compulsive ambition. I would compensate for a lifetime of unrelieved curiosity about our origins by finding out everything that could be ascertained about Krakowiec and its connections with my family. Pardonable genealogical curiosity burgeoned into an obsession. I spent the next 3 decades digging ever deeper into what turned out to be an immense historical quarry. I visited archives and libraries on several continents, consulted experts and struggled to acquire new languages. I had spent my life as a professional historian, but now I penetrated further into the past than I had ever previously ventured. In the course of my research, I built up vast databanks of official records, newspaper dispatches, census materials, registers of births, marriages and deaths, electoral results, medical reports, maps and photographs, as well as meteorological, geological, ecological, ornithological, architectural, judicial, military, ecclesiastical and every other category of information I could find. Soon I had assembled a veritable encyclopedia of statistics and documentation, illuminating every aspect of a place that had once seemed unknowable. But all that was just the beginning. Like the inhuman pedant Edward Casaubon in George Eliot's Middlemarch, with his project for the key to all mythologies, I conceived a crazily impossible aspiration. I would assemble a biographical dictionary of every single person in recorded history who had ever lived in Krakowiec. This would be no telephone directory, but the life story of each inhabitant, a kind of Naimierite super-prosopography. Sir Lewis Naimier was the Polish-born English historian whose monumental...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?